I'm calling the meeting of the Carver Select Board of September 18th to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would someone like to read the community prayer?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessings as we concern our life with the opportunity to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit of dignity and selflessness. May we become instrument of your support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us that we can become. Help us to achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially we lift our prayers for all the citizens of our community that we have been allowed to serve, that they may discover the fullness and joy of life that all we seek. And keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders in our hearts and thoughts. Amen.
And now we have citizens participation time. Is anyone here for that? Ms. Ferrand, please join us up here.
So my name is Donna Marie Forian. So I live at 27-8 South Meadow Village, and I just came before you guys.
Yep. Yeah, it's probably because it's near that right.
Anyway, I use my watch. All right. I guess they don't want me to talk. Anyway, so I came before all of you today just because. Oh man, I get my watch.
I think it's the system.
Okay, try this again. So I came before all of you just to speak a little bit about the Carver Police Advisory Committee that was right now is not happening. But it was the process that had me really concerned, and you as all selectmen allowed somebody to do a process that I thought was like not the correct way to do things. And we've all spoken about the past, how committees were formed in our town. And one of the things that really had me really hot and heated was I saw the list originally, and I saw how clergy was deleted off the list to be on this committee. And we've had a clergy on the Carver Fire Department for over 40 years. Why doesn't the police department have clergy on their committees and things like that? I think that's important. And the other thing on this committee, I didn't see one social worker selected. What I did see was Black Lives Matter, the National Seeds Organization, and other organizations that have representations on that committee. And I do have something that was on my iPad about defunding the police department, and that comes directly from Black Lives Matter organization, that they want to defund the police departments. And I'm against that. And I'm an officer's daughter and a deputy sheriff's daughter, and I'm a parent now of an officer that's soon to be an officer in the next 30 days. So this really is, my heart eats at me. And it eats at me when I go to bed. And it eats at me when an email just went out across the United States from the police fraternity brotherhood that states that officers have to be careful about being shot in the head. Okay, this eats at me, and just think that this town would turn around and try to put an agenda forth, and I'm not blaming anybody, It happened, we have to move on, but I do have to voice my opinion. And before anybody says that I am racist because I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, I have an article that I wrote about living in Carver in 1976. And in my article, it states about how I was raised with the best friends I ever had. I never called them black. I never called them black until June 1st, when my sister was dying, and she said, I have something for you. And our president is walking across the White House grounds, and I read this, and it says that I come from a town that's not prejudiced, and my best friends, and I put in quotes, are black. But I don't consider them black. I consider them my best friends. And I don't, until this was brought out, and until this Black Lives Matter appeared upon our police advisory committee, I was appalled. And I think our chief and our police, as a resident, I think our police chief and our police officers have done a darn good job in this town. And I don't want to see anything happen to what the integrity behind our police department. I'm not pointing fingers at all. I'm just talking from my heart as a resident, and I'm talking about the process that was allowed to happen. This could have happened to another committee in this town, and Lord only knows what could have happened. I also would suggest that maybe we ought to have looked at conflict of interest, allowing an attorney who could have, and I don't have the documentation to prove that, could have represented different towns in court cases involving police officers in town. So that's my only opinion, and I'm not pointing fingers. I know all of you, and I've had conversations with all of you, and I 100% support our police department, and I don't come here today as a representation of them or any other committee that I sit on. Thank you.
Sarah, may I have one
Yes.
minute, please?
Yes, Mr. LaFont.
First of all, the committee was very well-rounded, and it did include a social worker.
Yes, it did.
The intent of this was actually to be supportive of the police, to help educate the community as to what police have to deal with, especially in light of what's going on in the world today. So to characterize it that way, I think, is unfair. And also to insinuate that we may have someone on that committee that had a conflict of interest, I think is completely unfair and probably not appropriate for this forum. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaFont.
Um,
Anyone else? Can we
Sarah,
keep it brief?
If you,
Yes, Mr. Belvin.
I know we're not supposed to talk, but I just want to make sure that Donna understands. I hear you. I agree with you. I just want to make people understand that when I first saw that agenda, I made an email to the town administrator, and it was taken down. So I want you to be aware that you're not alone.
I'd also like it to be clear that that original agenda, I don't believe that came from you, Mr. LaFont, is that correct? For that
That's
committee?
correct, but we did amend that in a way that was more representative of what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Mr. Dunham, can we keep it real quick, because we got some
Well,
business here?
I'm hoping you didn't, with your extra comments, you're not going to cut back on the citizen participation time. Okay, my name's Alan Dunham, 11 Ricard Street. A couple of things real quick. One is the Citizen Police Advisory Committee. I believe at the August 4th meeting, Ms. Bogart even commented that this could be a very hot button issue. And I think it's something that the board really needs to have more input on before we get going. I know it's on abeyance until the state gets their act together and decides what they want to do. Also, I think I would like to recommend that every member of that committee come before the board, tell the board a little bit about them. There was quite a bit on Facebook about how this was a hand-picked board or committee, and that people reached out to. No one reached out to me. I saw this at your August 4th meeting, and I got greatly concerned, so I decided I wanted to put my name into the hat to be considered. I came up to the office and to get an application, and Mr. LaVaughn happened to be in and was kind enough to go ahead and meet with me. I have, between Rochester, New Hampshire, and Carver, 25 years firefighting, where I worked very close with the police department and police officers in emergency situations. It can get stressful. My job itself has me dealing with not only FEMA, but all the Southern New England state emergency management agencies. So I like to think, even though I don't have a degree in police work, I do have a good experience, so I thought I'd be an asset to that board. But I think this committee has to go forward with the full cooperation and agreement with, buy-in rather, of not only the police chief, but with the union. I don't think you can, have this, I don't want our police force to be going ahead and having to worry about, I'm being second guessed on everything I do by the citizens board. I would also strongly recommend, and I'll make it to when we finally have a meeting, that every member of this committee go through the citizens police academy, because you can't go ahead and sit and try to come up with recommendations for the police department if you don't know what their job is and have at least a rudimentary understanding of the situations that they have to deal with. So I just think the board should be taking a more active role in this before the committee actually starts meeting. It's not something that you can do disrespect, Rick, but this is not something you can just leave off on the committee and the town administrator in this time. That I think the board needs to take a stand and go on the record publicly of how you feel about it and what your recommendations would be. Second topic, trying to finish up real quick here. I noticed on your agenda for the joint school committee select board meeting an item of discussion of the consolidated maintenance of facilities department in town, with nothing else, no explanation of what this discussion or why they're having it, so I was kind of concerned. And so I called up, I talked to the chairman of the school committee, said, try to get some idea of why this agenda item came up, and was told this was something the select board wanted to have on it. So I've got no knowledge, and I'm leery of how that discussion may go. I'm hoping that it's not to some reason start discussions to disband it and go back to the old ways where the school department did their thing, the town did their thing, where we had basically two different parts of town ordering supplies, paying for labor for doing the same thing. I think that was a good thing we did, and it was approved by the town, that reorganization, and we did it. And so I'm just a little leery, and I'll be watching Zoom, and I hope that the Zoom meeting goes a lot better than a lot of the ones that I participated in and have seen since then, because I'm a little leery why we couldn't have it at a bigger facility so that people that are interested, like me, can come to it and go ahead and watch the discussion. So I'll be watching. And then finally, real quick, a reminder that Go Wicked Gold is having a car wash tomorrow, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. in front of the police station. I guess it's really going to be in the front of the old fire station. And if you want a golf cart, they are selling around only 400 tickets for a golf cart. It goes for a great cause. And I just want to let all the people out with your wonderful Nielsen ratings to know about it. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
May I have 30
Thank
seconds?
you, Mr. Dunham. Mr. LaFawn.
First of all, I think you had some interesting ideas on the first point, and some of the educational thoughts that you raised are exactly what the police chief was thinking of, too, to help educate people who may be on a committee. Had some very good ideas. Second of all, with regard to the looking at the joint maintenance, the point of that is merely to determine whether or not it's something that the school feels is working for them, and it's something that we should be looking at in the future. Not intended to have any decisions made whatsoever. So just for your knowledge. So.
Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to set the new special town meeting date for October 15th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Go ahead, Mark.
I'll make a motion to set that.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Second, okay. I just want to point out that we had originally set the date for October 20th, and as our town clerk mentioned to me, much to my dismay, that was right in the middle of early voting, and so we felt it was better to keep the date separate so that people could go to early voting and they can go to special town meeting. Instead of There would have been no conflict, but I didn't want anyone to feel conflicted. So I thought it was best for us to reset the date. So there's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can I just ask about?
Mr.
the
Townsend.
clerk here, that there are no conflicts with October 15th?
It's not the greatest timing, but I know it's very important that you guys get your business accomplished.
Yeah.
So, short of, scheduling it after November 3rd, it's the better date.
And Mr. LaFawn, do we have confirmation that town council?
Yes, that was one of the dates that was confirmed, correct, yes.
And the
Mr.
school,
Belvin?
excuse me, the school is booked for that date too?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Bogart?
What is the reason that it can't be held later?
Well, we have a special town meeting date. Well, why it can't be held later is because we have to, there's work that has to go into setting the tax rate. So in order to complete our budget, have a balanced budget, and complete the paperwork for the recap sheet, submit it to the state and have it approved, that takes time. So for us to get our tax bills out on time, this is we don't want to get much later than we're at right now. It's already pushing it a bit once you get towards the end of October. So that's why.
And the select board has to set the tax split in November.
Yes.
So if we waited until after November 3rd,
It would probably be too late
Yeah,
because there's a lot of paperwork that
We'd have a tough time
needs
getting
to...
our
be done.
tax bills out on time. So that's,
as long as there's a finite reason why there's a deadline,
Yep.
we
Yep.
have to do it, we can't put it
Sure.
off.
Yep, we've agonized over this. So there's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Kara. Appreciate it. Mhm. Okay, next we're going to have a discussion and vote to accept and expend the Plymouth County CARES Act funds. Mr. LaFawn, would you like to address that?
yes, as you know, this was intended to be on the last agenda, was on the last agenda, and there's been somewhat of an update since then, but I think you've all probably had a chance to look at the memo that I had provided to you previously. Carver right now has approximately $1.5 million reserved by the county who's administering the CARES Act. Most of the cities and towns in the state, and the program is being administered by the state. But I think there's 2 counties in the state who are doing it themselves. So $1.5 million is what has been earmarked for the town of Carver. And it'd probably be easy just to take you through this, and Meg was nice enough to color code this, which took me a little while to figure out what colors were based upon my deficiencies. But if you look through the accounting here, you can see that there are general categories, and I don't need to get into any one too deeply, but unemployment costs are something that we're looking to recover from March. And there's well, I'll get to the concept later. And some of the other expenses you can see listed that we've already applied for or in the application process. One of the larger ones, well, two pieces that I want to point out, and what I gave you today were 2 memos, 2 documents. One of them just outlines what the fire department has submitted for. It would seem from our conversations that about 75,000 of that 98 would not have any issues being accepted by the county. The rest of these are basically, again, custodial, PPE, custodial supplies. The town clerk's office, that's, for safety, plexiglass. So those are the things that you see on the total town. The school, as it right now, is about $500,000, but that's really about $650,000 as it's climbing. And school PPE, classroom supplies, et cetera, cleaning supplies, obviously they take the brunt of this, at least in the short term. The other piece that I think that we're concerned with is saving some capacity as time goes on. The process is such that we're supposed to be submitting either expenses or invoices for what we think we may need up through the end of December. Well, obviously, it's hard to do that when information is due October. Now, the date had been set for the end of September, but that's been pushed back to October 30th, which gives us a little bit of a more chance to see what our needs are. In fact, one of the concerns is, and not just by us, but by other communities, and obviously by the treasurer, the county treasurer, Tom O'Brien, who's administering this program, is, we don't necessarily know what's going to come up between October and December. So having an earmark and having the towns at least submit what we believe to be our needs up to December, those can be reallocated. As long as we don't already expend those funds, should other issues come up. One of the other pieces that I'll point out specifically is there is a reserve of, and you'll see it in the yellow third line from the bottom, of $109,000. That is specific for library COAs and veterans. We are hoping, and I know we've discussed it before, that we can get some assistance at Shirtliff Park to make that more appropriate for outside activities for seniors. And that essentially becomes the roofs of the pavilion and the restrooms, and upgrading or updating the restroom facility itself. So that's, Dave Seatentop is working on that and has some preliminary pricing. So when we went into this, 1.5 million seems like a pretty big number, okay? Then as we go through some of these needs, some of the current expenses, right now, we are, anticipating spending the funding so that our only gap right now is we only have about $107,000 of capacity. Needless to say, we have some submissions from various departments that would eat that up. So we're going to have to make some decisions internally, really between us and the school administration, as to how best to allocate these as the needs change over a period of time. So I don't know if you have any more specific questions, but what I'm seeking for the board to do is to vote to authorize the town administrator to submit and to expend the funds as they're received. And I assure you that that would only be done in cooperation with the school department, who we've worked very closely on to date. And that's really what's going on in other communities, too.
So I'm willing to entertain a motion to accept and authorize the town administrator to expend these funds.
I would also ask to submit
To submit,
application and to expend.
to submit the application and to
Yes.
expend the funds. Mark, Mr. Townsend?
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So this money, when you say expend the money, this money is not been utilized already? Or has it?
It has not been expended, no. We have
Okay.
one application in that has been approved, but before we file other applications, the county wishes to have votes of whatever the appropriate governing body is. And in this town, and actually most every town, it's either Board of Selectmen or Select Board.
But I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but the monies that we're looking for to get is this a reimbursement for monies that we've used? Or is
actually
it for
can be-
future expenses?
It can be both. It can be, we have expended some funds already for which it would be reimbursement. And we can also, purchase orders are enough to reserve the funding. Obviously, as we go forward, we will expend some of those funds, but purchase orders are enough to reserve the funding. And it's important for us not to have expended these funds, because what we don't want to do is expend funds and find out that they're not reimbursable, and then we've got to find the funds somewhere else. Or we earmark these with specific categories and an intent to spend funds in a certain way, but we don't actually spend those funds because, as I mentioned, we don't know what could happen between October and December, and we may have to shift some of those intended expenditures around someone. Because again, we don't know what other issues our public safety departments may be facing, or our schools. So it's actually a combination of both, Bob.
Okay. Do we have a breakdown of what we've already expended and what our future possible? Is it like a 30-70? Is it a 20-80?
You mean with-
For split of how much we've already expended and what will be a future? amount.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean about a percentage though, Bob. You mean between the school and
The-
town?
No, between the monies that are located. So we're asking for $1,000,004.
Well, we're
right.
ultimately going to ask for
Well,
$1.5 million.
$1,500,000, okay, we're
Yes.
gonna be asking for. Out of that, how much have we already expended of funds?
We've-
And how much are we looking for reimbursement? Do we have a percentage, a ballpark figure?
Yeah, we've expended in total about, I think, 175,000, Meg, roughly?
66.
Okay, because we had submitted, one of the things that we were very concerned with initially is getting some good numbers on unemployment that we've expended, for which we are reimbursed, can be reimbursed. So we do have significant applications going in, but for now, we've only been reimbursed for 166,000, and that's, is it 166? Okay. And those are for funds that have already been expended. And again, some of these, as you can see, are fixed costs that we know are eligible, and we know that we're not going to have any issues with the state funding. And that's been one of the concerns too, is, like I mentioned, is expending funds and not knowing if we're going to get reimbursed for those. And it's kind of a fluid situation, and we're, I know between me and I know Meg has spoken to Tom O'Brien on several occasions, and they do hold public forums, to answer questions. And this is a moving target for them too. So they've changed some dates. They've actually had to deliberate on what types of things are reimbursable. One of the advantages we have is we have a little bit of a sense of what they are accepting. I believe one town, I think it was the town of Marshfield, excuse me, had filed, I think, close to $1 million right out of the gate. Some of those funds were accepted, some of those weren't, so they were in the situation of having spent money. And again, that's one example of as towns do file for reimbursement and reserve through purchase orders, the rest of us get to see what types of things that the county determines are eligible. The two principles here is that it has to be related to, obviously, the COVID, and it has to be for items that are not already budgeted.
Okay, thank you very much
No.
for the explanation, I appreciate it.
No.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr.
I
Hoffman?
had a question, just procedural question for this, Rick. So the town's already submitted an application for
Correct,
funds,
correct.
and that was 160.
We submitted about 200,000, but we were approved for 166.
Okay, so once, and this is just because it kind of go up on when it was on the agenda last week. So when we get accepted, then do we have to approve that?
Well, no, well, again, that's the point of allowing, through me to expend those funds as they come in.
So what we got approved, because I was a little confused on the last meeting when it said we had to approve, so did we have to approve to accept the funds? So, in other words, the 100 and whatever that was just approved, do we have that yet, or we have to approve that today?
Well, the goal of what I'm asking the board to vote would be to essentially do that, to submit and to expend funds. So,
Okay, so I guess the reason I'm asking, so by
Yeah.
putting this off from the last meeting, that's delayed us from getting these funds into the,
well, not really, because the funding is, it's not like, we don't get those funds right away,
Okay.
So we have, we'll say we have some expenses that are in the system, and I don't want to, this may not be fair, but to some extent, this is a formality. So it hasn't held the city, towns up from processing their expenses. But until such time, and we'll put it this way, this is somewhat of a formality, so it hasn't stopped the process. But we have not, other than some of these fixed costs that I point out, we have, unemployment, et cetera, there's been nothing to expend yet. And we do have a lot of purchase orders, and what we intend to expend on. So it has not held anything up, I guess, if that's the key question, Jim, it has not held us up.
I was just
So,
wondering,
yeah.
because I was trying to read up on this, and I just didn't know if by putting this off, that delayed us actually receiving the money and getting it into our town bank account, or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it.
I would say no. no, because, again, it doesn't, I think, we've already received some funding, which wasn't held up because of, the board having not voted yet. But it is a requirement, so eventually towns have to have that in place.
Okay.
And again, Tom O'Brien is very, very cooperative, so he's looking to do what he can to help facilitate this, which has been very helpful for all of us.
All right, great, thank you.
Mr. Townsend?
Mr. LaFawn, how much money has the town received already?
We've received the 166, correct? Do we haven't actually have it in the bank yet? It's been approved.
As far as,
Yeah.
I don't know where it is.
Right, I know it's been approved, but if Meg says it's not in the coffers yet, then it's on the way, having been approved, so,
Okay, so
yeah.
is one of the formalities or one of the rules that Plymouth County has, this board, or through this board yourself, we have to vote to accept the money, right? That's one of the things they require.
They require that that there's authorization to submit the funds as well as to expend them. That being said, it's probably not a bad idea to actually include that in the motion, though, so that there aren't any, but I know what I'm recommending you vote is the vote that other towns have been taking, but to the extent that that's becomes part of the motion,
Well,
that wouldn't,
that's my thought.
that would only be helpful.
Do we want, as a board, authorize Mr. LaFawn on our behalf to accept these
Yeah.
monies, so there's no delay in the town receiving the monies?
Hmm.
And I guess I would amend my motion to authorize, have this board authorize Mr. LaFawn to
That's-
accept the Plymouth County monies on our behalf.
In addition to the rest of the motion?
Yes.
Okay. And Jim, did you second that before?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Mr. Belbin?
Bob had already.
could we also include that whenever the money's expended, that we're given an update by the town administrator, that when they're expended, that we know what they're expended on and how they're being expended?
Yes, and I think Mr. Townsend has already asked for that to be on the agenda
Yeah.
as a
Right.
continuous,
Right.
recurring item, exactly, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Well, thank you.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
I thank you. I know Meg thanks you, and I know our school administration thanks you.
Very good. Now, this next item, Mr. LaFawn, my understanding is that this is actually going to be put off until the 24th, when Mr. Eldridge can be here.
That's correct.
The discussion and possible vote. This is about a petition article that was originally submitted at the annual town meeting. And E. Page Wilkins is the person's attorney. She corresponded with Rick, and I was copied on it, and it turns out that he can't be here for this meeting, but he will be here on the 24th, so.
Right, and the origins of this, and I know some of you remember, there was a petition article submitted for the annual, and the proponent simply couldn't be there, and has asked for the courtesy for this to be moved to the special town meeting without having to go through the entire petition process.
Right.
So that's
Thank you.
the origins.
Yeah, I appreciate that explanation. Yes, Ms.
Will us
Bogart.
bumping town meeting up 5 days affect the submission dates? I know that last time, I think Elaine said the warrant has to be printed 14 days before, so is pushing it off affecting the prep of the warrant?
Yeah, we pulled our hair out over this one, too. I think the answer is no.
Right,
It's like real close.
And the fact that a lot of the articles that will be on the special, keeping in mind the zoning articles are being moved off by the planning board until the next annual town meeting. So most of the articles that remain are simply the ones that were already on the annual town meeting warrant. The major change is that it would be seeking to rescind the budget article that was voted previously and replace it with a new one that recognizes what we're doing to help balance the books in light of the current fiscal situation we're in. So, and the other thing with regard to this article we're talking about specifically, again, that's an article was already presented, so that's really word processing to move that over. We're not asking the applicant. If you vote to ultimately to honor the request of the petitioner, then that's simply something that, again, that's word processing. But it is something that in some format, when you review the entire warrant, or when Mr. Eldridge meets with the board, if you vote to put that on the agenda, on the warrant, then we will do that, so.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, moving along, discussion and possible, Serped appointments. Serped Commission, Select Board Representative Jim Walsh from the Planning Board, and the Joint Transportation Planning Group annual appointments, John Woods and Chris Vincent from our DPW.
I make a motion that we appoint those individuals.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. The next item, appointment to the Select Board's representative to the Zoning Bylaw Committee. Mrs. Bogart has offered to be our representative to that. I understand as well that if anyone else on the board's interested, you can just apply as a regular resident, so it's not. So,
Make a motion, we appoint Jen to that zoning bylaw committee.
is there a second?
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. Discussion?
Is this a new committee?
The planning board has, yes, it's a new planning board committee. They're reviewing zoning bylaws for the most part.
Yes, and I don't think it's any one particular, I think, holistically looking at these zoning bylaws and possibly making, well, the intent would be to make a recommendation in the future, whether that's for annual town meeting or beyond. I don't think that hasn't been determined yet, but the intent is to make any recommendations they have for the annual town meeting.
Mr. Levon, do you know whether or not the planning board is going to have the services of a zoning bylaw lawyer the way we did in 97, 98?
I don't know, but I did speak to Jim Walsh today about that, what kind of resources they may need. He wasn't sure yet, but that's something that I did suggest that if they thought that's something that they might be looking for, then then we will find a way to assist with that. I think back in the day, I think it was Mark Bobrowski who
It was
at the
Mark
time one of the,
Bobrowski.
I guess, one of the gurus in the state on zoning. And I know he's literally written books on zoning.
He has.
They're quite expensive, so he's
Yeah.
doing okay. So again, whether it's him, there are lawyers out there, even through our own town council if necessary. I mean, I don't think, there needs to be guidance. We don't have attorneys at every meeting. However, as things shape up, certainly, there needs to be some legal review to when the committee starts seeking to accomplish certain goals.
Well, and I very, very much recall in 1997 and 98 when we first did that whole zoning upgrade, we couldn't have done it without him. I mean, we knew what we kind of wanted to see, but we had no clue how to frame it. So it was really important that we had that guidance, and I hope
Yeah.
the same goes at this point. Ms. Bogart?
Another objective of that committee is to look at enacting and moving forward with things from the most recent master plan. And having been on that committee, I would love to see that move forward, because I remember as we were forming it as a committee, we had asked Serped, and then Serped and Marlene McCollum had said, this is the guiding document, the steering document, but if you want to get it done, you're going to have to take the initiative on your own. And as a part of that committee, I remember being one of the people saying, if there's anything in any way that we can move this thing forward,
I agree.
I want in. So this is kind of step 2 of the master plan, and I love being part of that committee.
I agree. I agree. Mr. Belvin?
So I actually asked that our town meeting have a zoning bylaw committee, which was found, quote, out of order, to create a committee at town meeting when you're allowed to create a committee at town meeting. But needless to say, I'm all for it. I think there's some conflicting language in our bylaws, and it needs to be updated because everything moves. Town moves in fluid ways, and from when it was 50 years ago to 20 years ago to 10 years ago, even to 5 years ago, this town has changed a lot. And some of it okay and others not okay. But this is a great start. And starting a new committee for the bylaws allows the public to come in here and say, hey, this is what I'd like to see changed. So I think this is a good idea, and I'm all for it.
I just had one other quick question.
Mr. Hoffman?
Do we know what the makeup is of this committee? So there's a select board appointee.
I don't know exactly. I know there's the Board of Selectmen. I believe the Planning Board wants 2 of their members on it, and the rest of them are at large. That's, so they are looking, again, speaking to Mr. Walsh this morning, they're looking at about 7 members, not specifically defined, and I know it's their intent to speak to some of the applicants on, I believe, Tuesday night. And I know there are 5 applicants right now for a target of 4 at large. So that's where they stand right now. So that's their intent Tuesday night. It may be very well be a situation where they believe, additional members are helpful. So it hasn't been completely solidified yet, but I believe by Tuesday night, that should be the case.
Because I guess my major question is not just this committee, but other committees that have been being formed recently, that this is the first I've heard about this, so I don't know if I missed something. But I know you said there are some at-large, one of us wanted to go on that. And I know several people out and, citizens want to participate in more committees. So I just don't understand why this wasn't more well publicized, if this is the first time that we're hearing about it.
Well, I can't speak for the planning board, but I know it's been on the website.
It has been, okay.
Yeah.
That's how I first found out about it. As soon as I found out about it, it piqued my interest. So, coming from the planning board, they talk about the committees there and kind of form them in-house. So I
Sure.
would assume it was probably on one of their agendas, but it was on the website probably 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So I might something maybe we want to think about in the future, in case you're not checking the website all the time, is there another way that we can promote committees for people that want to get involved? And again, shame on me for not checking the website as often as I should, but again, I didn't notice that. And I know, because I did get a couple of texts about this when it was on the agenda. What's this committee and how is, why is it being formed already? As Rick knows, with your police citizen
Yes.
backlash on that we don't want
Painfully
to have
so.
anything in the future. And, this is nothing we can
No,
discuss
no,
today, but I
I-
just want to kind of throw it out there that.
And actually, because you said that, I realize I've neglected to say the very top 2 things that are on this agenda. And one is that the committees, there are openings on several committees. Please see the Select Board page on our website for a listing and applications. So I should say that. And the other thing is that, that I really should say at every meeting is that the meeting is being cablecast by Area 58, Community Access Media, Channel 15.
And
Mr.
sorry.
LaFont.
I don't want to interrupt a member of the board, but this goes to another question or opportunity that Jen had actually brought up, and we're going to have somebody start working on this in the near future, is putting together a list of boards and committees and what their mission is, their function, so that if anybody was interested, for instance, in joining the ZBA, they can see exactly what it does. Because some people, I think, apply for committees in very good faith and don't really know what a board or committee actually does. I mean, some of their functions are by statute, and people might not know that. You hear, and I'm just using this as an example, you hear the Zoning Board of Appeals, and you don't know that they're really not reviewing and recommending zoning. That's really not what their primary function is, but you wouldn't know that. You hear zoning and you assume something. So to the extent that we can do that in a similar format and have that, available for people on the website, I think it's a good idea. It's really, tangential to your point, but I do think it's something that would be of service to the public and something that we intend to move forward with in the very near future.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend.
Just tagging along with what Mr. Hoffman said, and I think I've mentioned this before with some different committees. I do think we need to find a way as a town to get the word out in a broader sense. And I think there are a few ways we can do that. I see Ms. Gallerani here. Perhaps when we form a new committee like this or have openings, we could do some type of press release and
that's a
let the
good idea.
newspaper know. We do have the town social media page. I know we put those things out there, but maybe we could do it more often. I just think we need to find a way, because they probably should be, not everybody checks the webpage every couple of days for new updates. So I think we need to find a way to go to the public and try to broadcast these things on a wider basis. Just something to keep in mind as we go forward.
Can I make a comment?
Yes. Ms.
I just want to point out to everybody and the public, which we can remind everybody of occasionally, that is our website has e-alerts. So if anybody wants to sign up for an e-alert, I think you do have to go in through each committee and sign up for it, but it will alert you when there is a change or an update on the website.
Thank you, Mrs. West.
And I think you can do that to the main page, so if something is put on the main page, you will be alerted of it.
Thank you. There is a, Mrs. Bogart.
It was on the planning board's September 8th agenda. That's when they talked about it.
Thank you. Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? All in favor of appointing Mrs. Bogart as the Select Board's representative to the Zoning Bylaw Committee?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you, guys, I'll make you proud.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that.
I know, I appreciate this means a lot.
Okay. Next, we're proposing to have a discussion about the relationship among Select Board members and also among the members and the town administrator. I believe this was an item that you wanted to see on this agenda in
Yeah.
particular. So would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in general, I came to this committee fresh, and I know there's been a lot of talk, let's have, a good, fresh board, and I just want to try to make us all cognizant that we are, I'm not all kumbaya and like teamwork, but like, I don't want us to become divided like past boards have when we have different opinions or different relationships with people and stuff. Like, I don't want there to be a clear divide. I want us to have working relationships, especially when we're in this room. I want there to be more conversations. We're 5 people, but with one goal. So my hope is that we really don't become fractioned into these different groups. And again, it's not a kumbaya thing, but it's just kind of a like, let's just all really work to try to not let that happen. If we notice it happening, let's just try to not let it happen, because I think it's been a detrimental thing in the past. I know as an onlooker, seeing boards that were very divided was really upsetting. So that's kind of my piece on that. And then the relationship with the town administrator. I know that I had asked Rick one time when I met him, like, how often are the other members talking with you and meeting with you? Because I wanted to make sure personally, like, I'm holding up my end of things, that I'm being kept abreast and contributing like I could. And, he said it kind of varied between people. And I want to make sure we all kind of have that same relationship with him, also knowing that he's the town administrator and that we're the board. Because I know that we sometimes give him our personal opinion, and I know I've shared mine with you, and you've said you've talked to other members of the board to get their opinions to maybe help make decisions, but I don't want us to have 5 conversations with Mr. LaFawn, sharing our opinions with him and having him make a decision based on individual opinions outside of these meetings. Or maybe you only get 2 people's opinions, or whatever, like, we need to work together. I want us to be the decision-making body on the things that we should be, and I don't want our individual relationships or interactions with Mr. LaFawn or anyone who's in that role to be more influential. If I'm talking to him every day and I have a really close relationship, which I don't talk to you every day, you know that, but
You're welcome to.
right.
Yeah, you're welcome
And
to.
if I did, like, I wouldn't want my talking to you more to be more influential than anyone else's. So I don't know, and again, I don't want to lecture you guys, this is a conversation, I just don't want to see 1 or 2 or 3 of us steer more decisions than all 5 of us, when we should be talking to each other, because I've said it in the past, like, I wish we could talk more. I hate open meeting law, because I want to talk to you guys, I want to have conversations, I want to do more, I want to be more productive. So I would like to find ways that we can be productive in here and with each other, as opposed to trying to be more productive and influential outside of these meetings. I didn't prepare anything written, so I'm sure I could have said it better. But I don't want any of our relationships with the town administrator to influence decisions that could have been better if we talked about them as a board. Because we're all good people and we're all smart people and we got brains, so.
Thank you, Mrs. Bogart. Mr. Belbin?
Yeah, totally understand, and I agree. I'll talk more about that later on in my time, but Rick and I, even though how I voted on his contract and him having the position, I think we have a mutual understanding of how we interact with each other and for issues and comments and whatnot. We don't talk every week unless there's a meeting for the waste district or something like that, but if there's an issue, I have no problem going up to Rick and ask him, and if he turns around and contacts me or sends me an email or whatnot, I respond to it. I understand where you're coming from. I think that there are things that we can do amongst us, and this meeting here is actually a good start of that, because having a meeting once every 2 weeks, being a new board, I think we should be meeting a little bit more, just like this, and I can get some of this stuff out, and we can actually do some more collaborative items on changes. So I think this is a good way of starting it, so thank you.
Mr. Hoffman?
I think one of the things that has affected this board, especially with Jen and I being so new, that because of COVID, once we ran in first or second meeting, then it was summertime, once a month. So it wasn't every other week, twice a month, which I think once we get back into that schedule, it will, because I know we had a huge agenda the last time, but then because of the COVID incident, we had to cut that down.
Yeah.
That huge agenda was one of the largest, probably, agendas you've ever seen.
Yep, it was.
And that would have been till whatever time, but we needed to have it done because
Right.
it's a once a month. So I agree with what Jen's saying, but I think the more meetings we have, once we get back to our regular schedule, that'll help.
And if I can interject here, that is why we worked really hard last week, was it? I don't know. Anyway, to try and schedule these couple of morning meetings and an evening meeting before special town meeting, because every item that you all bring up for your select board notes are really, really important. And I can't stand the thought of talking about something that really matters at like 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock. I mean, so that's why you'll see in the next few meetings, I have those items that people, I think both of yours are ongoing items, but items particularly that Mr. Belbin and Mrs. Bogart brought up that are just like this discussion, that really merit some time. So that's one of the reasons we're meeting so often. Mr. Townsend, do you have any thoughts?
My only thought is that I think the key is that we all treat each other with respect. Conversations that we have as a board are certainly going to be limited to bound by the open meeting law. That's just the way it is. But I think when we're here at these meetings, that we treat each other with respect. And I think that same respect goes back and forth between ourselves as individuals and the town administrator. And I found that to be the case in working with Rick. So I think respect is the key, and as long as we treat each other with respect, we're going to have disagreement. We're going to agree on some things, disagree on others, but that's a healthy board. So I guess those are my thoughts.
May I throw my two
Yes,
cents in?
yes, Mr. LaFleur.
And I know Jen and I have had this conversation, and it's, it's a good one, and her concern, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, you're a new board member here, you've served on other boards and committees, but, what's the appropriate relationship with me? And my answer is, it's what you want it to be. Okay, I'm not here to tell members of the board what they want, how much interaction they want with me, what particular advice they may want from me. So it really is an individual type of interaction. Like I mentioned, you want to talk to me every day, I'll talk to you every day, and I mean that for any member of the board. You call me at 10 o'clock at night, I'm going to answer the phone, okay, unless my caller ID is accurate. And I think members of the board have found that to be the case. I consider that my job, to be available. So it's not for me to identify the relationship that each member of the board should have with me. I think that's up for each individual member. And there are times when I need to make a decision, and one of example was, recently we've had an opening in the Council on Aging, and I did talk to each individual member of the board about that, with what my intent was, and I got feedback from each member. Now again, I don't have to do that. That's one of, but to the extent that I want some input on a decision that I have to make, I think that's important. I also think that there are times when there may be a situation where, and you know, I'm just going to use an example that, maybe not an example, I guess conceptually, there may be an issue, a decision I have to make where one member of the board has a specific expertise in, or one member of the board has had years of involvement in a particular issue on a board or committee, and I may look to that person for some particular wisdom on something. So, and that's not to slight other members of the board. That's to just assist in a decision I may have to make. So if that happens, I hope nobody takes offense to that. That's just a matter of judgment in terms of, you know, who I think may be of specific assistance in a particular issue. So I also think that in the past, I know there have been some you know, goal setting done with a facilitator to help the board I guess, you know, kind of coalesce around some, you know, specific goals and objectives. And I think that's a very healthy conversation for the board. I think it's a healthy conversation in terms of what I need to be doing on behalf of the board and with the board, and that may be something you want to consider again. And it's been tough with not having personal meetings. Zoom, you can't do a facilitation with Zoom.
Yeah.
So now that we're, you know, more or less back to a normal type of meeting environment, that may be something that may be appropriate.
And I remember, Mr. LaFawn, early on when you first started here in the spring, I think you gave out a list of topics or
Sure.
issues or whatever to the whole board.
Well, actually, I didn't give them out. I solicited them.
Okay.
And then I put
that-
them together for the
Okay,
board.
okay.
I wasn't telling you what's important to you.
Right,
Wanna
that
make
is
that
true.
clear.
No, you're right. I take that back. You
Right.
did solicit those. Have any of our members talked with you about those, or, you know, what's more important to them than another?
Well, not since that point, but there are members of the board that may have a particular interest or something that they may have been, you know, we'll say an interest, and that I will get questions occasionally on, you know, what's the status of this, what's the status of that. So yes, there are communications on that. And, you know, one of the things I've done historically in prior experiences, and usually, you know, comes, you know, some sort of, you know, even a simple spreadsheet, just to give general updates on each item. You know, it may not be that intricate, but it's good to have. I mean, if the board would like to have me do that, I'm more than happy to do that, too. I mean, some of those concerns are really now in the rearview mirror, like preparing for annual town meeting, or some issues that were more short-term. And I do think that to the extent there's somewhat of a more formal goals and objectives by the board, that can be helpful for all of us. But once again, that's, you know, your decision. If we want to keep this a little more, I don't want to, you know, informal, then, you know, that's okay too. It's really what I take my cues from the board on that.
Yes, Mrs. Boger.
40% of this board doesn't have that document that you referenced and able to put input on it. Is it possible to get it?
That's an
sooner?
excellent idea, yes. My apologies.
Sorry.
That's a very, very good point.
Great.
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's right, Jen. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's true. That was before the election.
Hey, I'm looking for the new guys.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a,
Represent.
and,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and quite frankly, to maybe
here.
go through the process again, even in an informal way. I think that's probably not a bad idea, especially with the new kids on the block, so.
Mr. Belvin.
Yeah, the whole thing with goals and objectives, until we get into a full-time town administrator instead of the intern town administrator, I think what we're doing right now is a good thing, keeping it fluid or whatnot, instead of just set goals and objectives right now, just my opinion.
Okay.
So in sum, like, I totally agree, like, we all have different expertise, we all have different experience, we can all lend different help to you, and you're gonna lean to us. I just, in general, I don't wanna see any board member be the one to be leaned on more often. And I think if we're starting to notice that, we need to talk about it before it just gets too deep, because boards have gotten the brain pain is informed, and I just don't want that, so. Plus, we talk about opinions, I might change my mind on something because of what you said, or your expertise, like, conversations are great, you get ideas,
Yeah.
so, okay, I'll be quiet.
No, no.
I just want us to work together more and to work in this room and to, yeah. We don't have to hold hands around a campfire, let's,
Phew. Just kidding.
yeah. But let's just, I just don't want to see the past repeat itself. And we are capable of not, but.
And I will do my part, but that's all I can do.
Well, speaking for myself, I certainly appreciate that. I think it's a different environment that we're in now than previous environment. And I think it's a healthy situation. That's my take on it. Any further discussion? Okay. We can continue this at a future date.
Good discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of minutes of July 7th, August 4th, and August 21st.
Can I make a motion that we approve all three, July 7th, August 4th, and August 21st?
You may. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes?
On
Mr. Townsend?
July 7th,
Mm-hmm.
on the last page, the discussion of the executive session minutes,
Mm-hmm.
I did ask that we schedule an executive session so that we could discuss these minutes, and I just think that should be noted
Okay.
in there.
Oh, okay, you asked it at
I
that
think I
meeting?
asked for an executive session so that we could discuss those minutes.
Okay.
And that's not in the minutes, so I'd like that
Okay,
in the minutes.
I'll make that adjustment to add that.
so that's an amended minute?
Amended, yeah.
For July 7th, and I think Mrs. Weston has that in her notes.
Thank you.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second
You okay with?
to approve these minutes and the amended minutes of July 7th, 2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Executive session minutes, approve and release the minutes of April 15th, 2020, and April 14th, 2020.
I'll make that motion to approve both.
I'll second that.
Point of order is April 15 and 16, not 15 and 14.
I'm sorry, correct. You are correct. Thank you. There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining since I wasn't part of the meeting.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, Jim, do you, what's that?
I'll abstain as well.
Okay, so you should probably not have seconded the motion?
Correct.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Mark? Okay, it's all right. It's procedural. Okay, there's still a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And we have 2 abstentions. Okay. Approval and not to release the executive session minutes of May 19th and June 2nd, 2020. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for discussion.
Is there a second? There's been a motion and a second. Mr. Belvin?
Is there a reason why we're not going to release these 2 dates?
Mr. LaFawn?
Well, I will say that I was prior to my time, but
Mm.
I know that through Elaine, that there was a request for town council for his opinion on whether or not they should be released. And it says the board may continue to withhold the minutes.
But it doesn't say why?
One moment, let me adjust my
Sorry.
focus here. The board may continue to withhold minutes for the executive session held on May 19th, when the board met to discuss strategy with regard to litigation in the matter of DEP release tracking. It's my understanding that litigation may still be pending, and therefore releasing the minutes would defeat the purpose of the executive session.
Okay.
The board may continue to withhold the minutes from the June 2nd executive session, when the board met with town council to discuss whether to release minutes from the previous executive sessions. In my opinion, these minutes can be withheld under the attorney-client privilege. The minutes indicate that the board was seeking advice of counsel regarding the release of previous executive session minutes. As Attorney Jenkins explained to the board, releasing such minutes can impede counsel's ability to provide candid advice to the board. So that's
And that was the second?
That's
Yeah.
correct, so basically on both of those, it tells, say, the board may withhold based upon those points. It doesn't say you have to, but it says you may.
So I'd like to change my vote to approve and not release the May 19th, 2020 only, as a separate vote.
Okay, is there a second, Mr. Townsend?
Sorry, Bob, so you want to not release the May?
The May 19th, I don't want released
Yeah.
due to potential litigation.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 2 abstentions?
Yes.
Okay.
And I make a motion that we approve the release of 6/2/20.
Is there a second? Mr. Townsend? Sorry.
No, I'd like an opportunity to reread those minutes along
Okay.
with town council's opinion before I
Okay.
vote on that.
Okay, well, motion fails, so we'll have to consider those at a future meeting, so people will have a chance to read council's advice.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
can we,
Mr. Belvin.
can we have that on the next agenda then? So,
The minutes of 6/2/20?
on 6/2/20.
Okay. Okay. And now, select board notes. Mr. Belvin?
All right, so I'm going to take the second one first. Creation of a binder for select board members. So us all being new, all right, when we come before this board, it's one of those things that, okay, yeah, I ran for selectman, great. I became a selectman, great. Okay, now what? What's my powers? What do I do? How do I do this? There's no manual, really. Everything's here, there, and the other way, of trying to gather information about what your job and your role is as a Board of Selectmen member. You get one person that says, well, you're just a policy-making board. Okay, yeah, but we're a lot more than that. And we need to know what our job role is, what our limitations are, what we can do, what we can't do. And there's no one place that puts all this information in. So I'm kind of proposing that we create a binder for our selectmen that come in and take over for our roles in the future. I tried this with the Boy Scouts, and it didn't work too well. I think it's a good concept to turn around and say, okay, here we go. We have a chairman's binder, a vice chairman's binder, a member's binder that go ahead, and I even started it, okay? And I've been kind of compiling a list of what we want to see or could see, and I'm hoping that we have more discussion about this, but just to give you a heads up, the first one, I think, would be our town bylaws, okay? And that goes in and shows that this is what the Board of Selectmen are a part of. The job descriptions of the town administrator and how we do things. And that's one of the first things we really need to look at. Say, okay, this is a guideline, but then we have all these other things that are under ours. We have the zoning bylaws that, yeah, we do have some things here in the zoning that we have to deal with. We have a personnel code we have to deal with. We have state laws that govern what we do. We should keep track of that, of what we're allowed to do. Again, policy procedure, code of conduct, the open meeting law. We should have that. A guide to financial management for all town officials. I thought that was a really important guide to kind of give me an understanding, because it says what does Board of Selectmen do, but it also gives you an understanding of the financial backings of the town. Meeting procedures. Well, we all need to know what the meeting procedures are. What the appointing authority, who do we appoint, what do we appoint? Okay, which goes back to job descriptions of the different boards and committees. Gives us an understanding and say, okay, do we want to look at these qualifications for certain boards and committees, or what we want to do? Like, to give you an understanding. We should have copies of all the contracts that our done throughout the town, whether it be an employment contract with a union or a contract between the town administrator, the police chief, the fire chief. These are all documents that, they're all here, they're all available, that we can go in and get some. But we, as Board of Selectmen, I think we need a binder for all these information for us. So when we leave office, we can go to that next person, sit down with them and say, here you go. This is my binder. This has all the information here that we do. Enjoy your reading. It's a lot. Okay? And like I said, I've been trying to do this since I became a selectman, of trying to educate myself into this job. I want to make it easier for other people. And I think a binder that has this information in it, all compiled together, would be a good start. Any comments, issues with that one?
Well, the select board note not really intended for
Okay.
discussion.
So my next one is town administrator bylaw review. So I think that under our bylaws, it has town administrator. And I'd like the Board of Selectmen here to go forward and have discussions on how we would want to change the possible town administrator job roles here in our bylaws. I think that in the past, the Board of Selectmen possibly were minimized in our job roles and responsibilities. Things that were done, I don't think were right. But I think through some changes of that and redirection on focusing what the town administrator job roles are, would be a good thing, that we actually review the town administrator bylaw in the future meetings that we have together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belbin. Mrs. Bogart.
All right, so two-parter, community involvement, engagement, and then possible COVID-safe community events. The community involvement engagement kind of relates to stuff we've talked to before about when we have committees. Let's let people know about them more. What can we do to have more of a relationship with the public? Let's get the word out there about committees, about events, about anything we can, and try to get more people engaged and excited and feel connected to what happens in this building. Whether that's, website, Facebook, whatnot. We'll brainstorm that. And then possible COVID-safe community events. We gotta start doing something to let people do stuff. I'm from Central Mass, and I was out there recently, and something that's, I don't know if you do it out here, but it's big out there, townwide yard sales. Just something like that. You pick a day or you pick a weekend, and it's the townwide yard sale. And if you want to have a yard sale at your house, Town Hall puts together, an address book of who's having one, and, maybe a little description of what you want to sell. Sometimes you can do it on like the town green too, but if we can't. But just something like that could be fun to do and give the community stuff, sometimes little things are fun. Brainstorm more stuff that the community can do in a time when we can shut down.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. No, that's great. That's great. That's great. Mr. Hoffman, I understand you didn't have anything for this particular for this meeting. Mr. Townsend.
Thank you. So I'd like to propose that the town of Carver adopt the second week in September annually as Carver Public Safety Recognition Week. This is an idea I've had for a long time, and the second week of September always encompasses September 11th, which is when we think of our first responders. We think of them all the time, but especially on September 11th. And I just think this would be a good annual way for the town to recognize all those folks that work so hard every day. I discussed this with all three chiefs. We formulated the wording for the Public Safety Recognition Week. That came with input from all three chiefs, and all were supportive. So, that's something I'd like to see us adopt.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I have a brief statement here. The Select Board Chair's policy regarding recognizing the public during a regular meeting of the Select Board. If members of the public would like to speak at a business meeting of the Select Board, they may do so during the citizens' participation part of the agenda. Comments from the public must be limited to 3 minutes. Public comments may be either about an item on that meeting's current agenda or about another issue. Please be aware that during citizens' participation time, the board cannot discuss or comment what was discussed by a member of the public during citizens' participation unless what has been said by a member of the public is a comment relevant to an actual agenda item at that meeting. If that is the case, if the public's comment is relevant to an agenda item at that meeting, then it can be addressed by the board when we deal with that specific agenda item at that meeting and not earlier, so we can avoid having to discuss that item twice in the same meeting. That's pretty much straight out of our agenda policy, actually, if you take a look at that. But I just wanted to clarify that for the public. And then specifically, I wanted to address an incident that at our August 4th Select Board meeting, I did not allow several members of the public to speak during our regular business portion of the meeting, since they had ample opportunity to speak during citizens' participation time. I have been asked why, then, that I allowed 2 members of the Conservation Commission, one of them the chair, to speak on an agenda item during the board's business meeting. I let them speak because I was asking to form a conservation land ad hoc committee that would have included these 2 commissions without having proposed this idea to their respective chairs. I felt, since I had not come to them first with this ad hoc committee idea, that these 2 commissioners should be allowed to offer their opinions during our business meeting. Had there been members of the Agricultural Commission present at our board meeting, I would have allowed them to speak as well. I'd like it to be understood that I do not play favorites, and that as chair I will not start playing favorites now or at any time in the future. I chose to move forward because speaking at these two commissions, before speaking to these 2 commissions, because I felt that making conservation land more accessible to the public was important to do sooner rather than later, especially during this time of social isolation, and to give the public more access to outdoor activities in town. I believed I followed our agenda policy appropriately and within its scope. And I will have a copy. I have a copy of that for you, Elaine. The last item, I'll be very brief. I just wanted to kind of update the board and the public on this select board notes section. Excuse me?
I think you're, okay, there you go. I couldn't hear you on the mic.
Testing.
There you go.
Okay. So I wanted to just briefly update the board on the select board notes section. I had introduced this because in the past, I think that we were not allowed to talk about issues or concerns or to propose future agenda items, and I think it's important for board members to be able to do that. I did want to clarify, though, that when people are making comments or bringing up ideas that aren't necessarily future agenda topics, those things won't make it to an agenda item. So I wanted to be really clear that if you guys want something to become an agenda item, like you've done, let me know very specifically. I'd like this on the next agenda, okay? Because, and it will get there. I also would ask that you prioritize your items, because everything you talk about here is important to me, and I think to the rest of the board. But again, I'm trying to keep it more meetings, shorter meetings, but more of them, so we can really get to some of those topics that are hugely important. So if you could, work on prioritizing those things for me, that would be very helpful. And if possible, well, it's the same thing. If you can keep the list short, that's great. If you can't, just tell me which one is the most urgent to you. And I have a running list in my files at home, so these topics will not get lost, I promise. So that is my select board comments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have to put the next meeting date out of?
Well, yes, I should probably say that. It's not listed on the agenda, but the next meeting date is September 24th at 7 p.m.
Well, we have the school committee one next Monday.
Sorry, we're having one on the 21st, correct, with the school committee on the 21st.
Which is my vacation week.
And that one is that also at 7, yeah?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And that's a Zoom meeting.
And that's a Zoom meeting. One of the members of the school committee could not meet in person, so.
I would also point out, I don't know how many of you RSVP'd for a meeting at Old Colony
Right.
Regional School District.
That's on the 23rd. Mhm.
I know that Bob and I can't make it. We've got attending the CMW Refuse District meeting at 5, so.
Yeah,
just
I
so
plan
you're
to
aware
be there. I don't know if
Okay.
anyone else is,
what
but
that's worth.
thank you. And then our next regular meeting of the board is on the 24th. So is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you.